Hello, you funky fans of fabulous rock and roll. How are you doing? It's me, Phil, without Ben. If you watched my Mick Jagger video, which went on not long ago, I did tell you that Ben's still not quite back, but he nearly is. He's on the mend, thanking you for all your good wishes, and he will be back with me soon. But he has encouraged me to do some monologues. So I'm really sorry. It is me blathering on again, but you can blame Ben because he said I should do them. So there you go. Now, not long ago, I did a video with Ben where he confessed all about his guilty pleasures in music. And to be fair, he did a full and frank confession. He even admitted to liking, I can't remember what he admitted to liking now. He admitted to liking the Lighthouse Family, I think, and I can't remember what else was there, but it was, he didn't hold back, to be fair. He had one or two albums that were not considered cool, let's put it that way. And so I thought I'd talk about a guilty pleasure album I've got, but this is guilty pleasures with a difference, because this is guilty pleasures by great artists, because I've got a guilty pleasure of Bruce Springsteen. Now, I know what you're saying. You're saying, how can you don't have to feel guilty about liking Bruce Springsteen, because he's one of the great singer-songwriter performers of all time. He's one of the icons of rock history. Not everybody likes him, of course. There are some people, like all artists, is a bit of a matter of taste. Maybe some people don't like his voice, etc. But I think most music fans, objectively agree Springsteen's one of the greats. So how can I have a guilty pleasure with the boss? Well, I can, you see, because when people do these lists of putting artists' albums in order, and I watched a few of these kind of videos online, Springsteen fans, when they are ranking the albums, and they can never agree on which are the best albums, which I guess is a sign of a great artist, isn't it? You've got real depth in your catalogue if your fans can't agree on exactly what the top 10 albums are or which order they should be in. But the thing is, the Springsteen fans almost universally put this particular album very near the bottom, if not the bottom. And the thing is, I have to confess to you today, I kind of like it. In fact, I do like it quite a lot. This album came out in 1992. It is Human Touch. Now, this is from, I say April, I think it was April or March or April. It was the spring anyway, 92. I remember it. Bruce Springsteen released two albums on the same day. He kind of copied Guns N' Roses, because the previous autumn in 91, they'd released their Use Your Illusion albums on the same day, and the hype got them some pretty good sales. I think did they sell something like 1 million albums in a week or something crazy? Anyway, Springsteen had this album I'm talking about, Human Touch, in the can, and that was ready to be released. But he then, I'm not sure exactly how long before, but not long before, wrote some more songs. He wrote 10 more songs and put them together quite quickly. I think he played a lot of the instruments on the album Lucky Town, which came out on the same day. Now, I see these albums as part of a trilogy, because when was it? Mid-80s, he didn't really sack the band, but he stopped working with the E Street Band after their big tour for Born in the USA. And I think around this time as well, he was having problems with his first marriage. His first marriage came to an end in the late 80s. I don't think it lasted very long, really, a couple of years. I may be right in thinking that. But that informed his album Tunnel of Love, and that's often seen as being his divorce album. And that's an album on which some members of the E Street Band appeared, but they kind of appeared separately as kind of session musicians coming in and doing a little bit here and there. And it was mainly, there was a lot of Bruce on his own on this album. And the songs are all centered around, love and family and marital breakdown. Not on every single song, but certainly on the title track, Tunnel of Love. It's all about that. And, the whole mood and feel of the album is very reflective. So it was considered to be very much, influenced by how he was feeling at that time. Now, Human Touch, a couple of years later, well, we're talking about 4 years later, but he I think at this point got together with Patti Scialfa, who is still his wife now. I think she started out as a backing vocalist for him, and then of course she's ended up being a member of the E Street Band. But so there's a bit more of an optimistic tone on Human Touch because he'd fallen in love again, and that, I think, makes it different. But I see it's part of these three albums are part of this sort of, they're all quite emotional for him, or totally tied in with his life. But Human Touch has, I say, been derided or certainly criticised by a lot of Springsteen fans. And I think there's a number of reasons for this. But the key reason, I think, is the fact that the E Street Band aren't on it. I mean, he recorded this album with a load of the cream of LA session musicians. I think the late Jeff Porcaro, who was a member of Toto, is on this album, and I think it must be one of the last albums that Jeff Porcaro did before his untimely death. And I think there's also, I think I may be right thinking Randy Jackson is the bass player on this, and there's a lot of other, musicians who played on no end of superstars recording sessions on this album, but it's not the E Street Band. So if you're, for long-term Springsteen fans who are, really wanted the E Street Band to come back because they hadn't done anything with Bruce for a few years, this would have been a disappointment, and that was another reason not to be too keen on this album. Other things that have been criticised about it are the fact that it's got quite an early 90s production. It's quite sort of glossy. It sounds like, how would we put it, adult-oriented FM radio rock, sounding more like, albums made by big names who do studio recordings. People like Elton John and Sting and all that, that sort of fitting in more with that, and maybe Bryan Adams and John Mellencamp and those sort of people that were big in American sort of mainstream rock at that time. Not sounding anything like Nirvana and Pearl Jam, which were, at the cutting edge of rock at that time. So he perhaps felt a little bit out of place. He seemed a little out of place at that time, 1992. It wasn't the time when Bruce Springsteen was really cool. He was just a middle-aged artist who'd been around a while, and maybe he wasn't really attracting many youngsters at that time. I may be wrong about that, but I don't think he was. But so, this album has been dissed, and some people think that there's songs on it that aren't very good. I don't think there's many that aren't very good myself. I mean, the title track, Human Touch, was played a lot on the radio at the time. That's probably the best known song on there. And yeah, okay, it's it's a more commercial Springsteen song. It's a sort of song that works well on the radio, but I think it's good. And then you've got another one which I remember being played on the radio at the time. I think it was more well known in America, and it's another of the songs for which this album is derided a bit, and that's 57 Channels and Nothing On, which some people hate and some people like. And I actually, at the time it came out, I remember thinking that it was a bit, why is Bruce Springsteen doing this slightly comedic song about buying a TV and not liking any of the channels that he could pick up on his satellite dish. But now I kind of like it. It's got a bit of a funky thing, and I just quite enjoy it. It's maybe a bit throwaway, but I quite like it. And then there's some songs on here which I think are really good Springsteen rock songs. There's Gloria's Eyes, which is, I've never heard that anywhere apart from on this album, but I think it's a good one. There's a ballad called With Every Wish. It's got a trumpet in the background, if I remember rightly. Again, some people might say that he was doing a little bit Springsteen by numbers here, that he wasn't really breaking any new ground. Maybe he wasn't, but I still think it's okay. Roll of the Dice, another rocker. And then there's a song called Man's Job, which has the lyric "Loving you, baby, is a man's job," which some people might think is all a bit cheesy, etc. But when you hear this song, I just think it's quite touching. It's quite country-ish, but it features Sam from Sam and Dave, the legendary soul duo. He sings a backup vocal on this. And I say it's a little bit country. In fact, you could argue that this album is Springsteen's modern country album. It has got, it does sound a little bit like those highly produced mainstream country albums that come out of Nashville. So it is, it's not everyone's taste. And that sort of thing is not really normally my taste. But for some reason, I just tolerate it on this record. There's another song called "I Wish I Were Blind," which I think is, again, a standout track. And, there's nothing on this that I really hate. I can get why people might not like a few of the songs, but there's 14 songs on there. And it's my guilty pleasure. It's Bruce Springsteen's Human Touch. Sorry if you're a Springsteen fan who doesn't like this album, but I do quite like it. So that was my guilty pleasure. What's your guilty pleasure by a great artist? Have you got a guilty pleasure by a great artist? Is there an album that a highly acclaimed, highly thought of band or artist has got in their discography that is a little bit reviled, that people think it isn't very good? It was maybe their worst album, but you like it? You got one of those? You can confess all in the comments below. We won't judge you. Don't worry. I hope you won't judge me either. Join me for another edition. Hopefully Ben will be back. He'll have a few guilty pleasures in his closet. You can bet on that. Bye for now.